DVB Digital Fast.
Hello and welcome to DVB Newsroom. I'm Nora. Joining me today is Scot Marciel, the former U.S. ambassador to Myanmar and the author of Imperfect Partners, the United States and Southeast Asia. Thank you for joining me today, Mr. Marciel.
It's my pleasure.
You were the U.S. ambassador to Myanmar from 2016 to 2020 during Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy government. How was your relationship with the NLD during this time?
It was generally quite good. There were some difficult times, for sure, particularly during the crisis in Rakhine. But overall, I think, we were very supportive of the reform effort and the effort to build democracy. And so that made for a good partnership.
The NLD won landslide victories in the 2015 and 2020 elections, defeating the military's Union Solidarity and Development Party. Do you think this could be a reason for the coup rather than unproven allegations of voter fraud?
Yeah, absolutely. The allegations of voter fraud were just an excuse. The military, I think, clearly was afraid that another term of an NLD government would lead to a weakening of its position, not only politically, but economically. And so that was, I'm sure, the reason for the coup.
So the military felt threatened?
I think. I confess in my 4.5 years in Myanmar, I can't say I ever fully understood the thinking of the Myanmar military. But from everything I've heard and learned, they were concerned that their power would be, that the NLD would gradually chip away at the military's power.
And what about the generals themselves? What was your relationship with the Min Aung Hlaing and the Myanmar military during your tenure?
Not very good. Initially, when I got there just before the inauguration of the NLD government, there had been quite a bit of opening, of course, under former President Thein Sein. And so there was some hope that the military would not get in the way of further progress. So we engaged with General Min Aung Hlaing and others to encourage them not to get in the way of further reform, saying that our ability to work with them, the military, would depend on their willingness to allow reforms and the building of democracy. But over time, it became clear that they were not interested in that. And that certainly with the continued fighting in Kachin and elsewhere, and then in 2017 with the crisis in Rakhine, the relationship became quite difficult.
Yeah, 2017 was a very difficult year because not only did the military carry out clearance operations in northern Rakhine against the Rohingya, which was labeled genocide by the U.S., but also constitutional law expert and NLD advisor U Ko Ni was murdered. How did the U.S. respond?
Well, we, like I think most people in Myanmar, were horrified by the assassination of U Ko Ni. In fact, he was supposed to be at my house the next week for dinner. He was someone that I and we deeply respected. So it was shocking, particularly the fact that it was done very openly at the airport as he returned from a flight, as you recall. So it sent a very, and it was pretty clear. I mean, we weren't involved in any kind of investigation, but from everything we've heard, it was pretty clear that people associated with the military had carried out the assassination. So it sent a message that the military was willing to be ruthless and brutal in countering any efforts to weaken its hold on the country.
Yeah. So now let's move to the time after the coup. Since the 2021 military coup, how has U.S. policy toward Myanmar changed?
Yeah. Well, I would say even before the coup, enthusiasm in Washington for the Myanmar sort of effort to carry out reforms had declined somewhat, mostly because of the crisis in Rakhine. That led to a fair number of people in Washington being quite discouraged. But of course, nonetheless, the U.S. reacted very strongly to the coup. We saw it clearly for what it was, a military takeover with no constitutional basis. And so the Biden administration, I was no longer ambassador by that time, but the Biden administration correctly criticized the coup sharply, froze about $1 billion of assets so that the military couldn't use that money, and imposed other sanctions. Subsequently, I think there was rhetorical support for the pro-democracy forces and others trying to push back against the coup. But in my own view, not enough attention or resources spent by the United States to try to help the pro-democracy forces emerge victoriously. So that I think, in the saying in the United States would be that our heart was in the right place, and the direction of the policy was good and very supportive of, I think, the broad majority of people in Myanmar, but perhaps lacking some energy and willingness to invest resources.
Yeah. President Trump sent a letter addressed to Min Aung Hlaing about tariffs, who responded with his own letter praising President Trump. What does this mean? Is there a dialogue between Washington and Naypyidaw?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm out of government. I've been out of government for a few years, so I can't say with certainty. I don't believe there is a dialogue. My sense is that, first, President Trump doesn't know anything about Myanmar. He was sending letters to all kinds of governments. My guess is there was not a lot of thought. This was not a conscious decision. Let's send a letter to the military junta. Someone said, well, these are the guys in charge in Naypyidaw, so we send them, the letter goes to them. I think it was no more than that, is my opinion, because I don't think either the president or the people around him were thinking deeply about the situation in Myanmar when they sent that letter. General Min Aung Hlaing has heard, I'm sure, that President Trump likes to be flattered, so his letter in that sense made sense. But as far as I know, there is no dialogue, not at any, there may be a very low-level dialogue that I'm not aware of, but nothing more than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sanctions have also been debated. Washington has also lifted sanctions against 5 individuals and companies linked to the Myanmar military. What do you think about this?
Well, I think in general, even under the Biden administration, there was a wariness to impose broad sanctions because the experience in the past before, 2010 to 2012 was that I think a broad consensus emerged in Washington that broad sanctions tended to hurt average people in Myanmar. And so any sanctions should be targeted. So that's what the Biden administration did. I don't have any information on any authoritative information on the reason for the lifting of those sanctions, but I've been told by multiple people that it was more of a technicality, not meant to send a political signal, even though lifting them certainly does seem to send a political signal, but that, I'm told, was not the intention.
Mm-hmm. Now to the regime's plan for elections. The regime in Naypyidaw has announced that it will hold elections starting on December 28th. Many Western countries have already called it a sham election since the NLD can't participate. Do you think these elections will take place?
I think there's a good chance they will take place. Yes. I absolutely agree that if they happen, they will be a complete sham. First, there's no need for them because there were, of course, legitimate elections in 2020. Second, not only can the NLD not participate, but you're in a state of conflict with an illegitimate junta trying to run elections that there's no evidence most people in Myanmar want or believe are necessary. So I think probably the elections will go ahead. They will be a sham. It may be sufficient for some neighboring countries to applaud them and say now everything's fine, but they won't actually, I don't think, do anything to fundamentally solve the crisis.
Could this give the regime more cover internationally?
Maybe some, but the countries that are, in my view, most likely to applaud them or welcome them China, perhaps India, maybe a few others, they're already supporting the junta. After being a little bit cautious for a while, China has clearly embraced the junta now, including visits by General Min Aung Hlaing. So it might make some difference. There may be a few other countries that applaud them and are willing to work with the junta, but I don't think it will make a huge difference.
Yeah. And what about the U.S. positions on this? The State Department has told U.S. officials to avoid commenting on elections around the world. Does this mean Washington will not criticize elections in Myanmar?
To be honest, normally I could predict what the U.S. will do. Under the Trump administration, it's very hard to predict because the normal approach that we've taken for decades is no longer applicable under the Trump administration. So honestly, yeah, we should speak out and make it clear that we do not think these elections are legitimate and that they should not be respected by the international community. But I have no idea, frankly, what the Trump administration will do. It's very unpredictable.
Other countries are taking a different stance. China, Russia, and several regional ASEAN countries have expressed support for the regime's elections. What do you think about that?
Well, it's unfortunate, but not surprising. Russia, obviously doesn't care about free elections anywhere. It's simply trying to increase its own influence and sell weapons. China is, I would say, more concerned with, they're hoping, I'm guessing, that these elections will calm things in Myanmar because they don't care about democracy or the well-being of the Myanmar people. They care about having enough stability for their investments to go forward. So that's not surprising. And ASEAN, I've heard different things from different ASEAN countries. I don't get the sense that ASEAN is united on this. So some countries may welcome them, partly because they don't know what else to do. For ASEAN, the crisis in Myanmar is a bit of an embarrassment because under the ASEAN centrality, ASEAN is supposed to be the one to try to resolve it. Now, I don't think ASEAN could resolve it no matter what, but I think they're hoping, some countries in ASEAN may be hoping that these elections lead to a period of less conflict and more stability so they can focus on other things. But we'll have to see what ASEAN as a whole does and what all the individual member countries decide.
What kind of changes are needed within ASEAN regarding its 5-point consensus, which ASEAN chair Malaysia once implemented before elections?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the 5-point consensus. I applaud ASEAN for moving back in 2021 to try to put some pressure on the generals to end the political violence. But the trouble is that the 5-point consensus does not reflect the reality of Myanmar. There's no way the military is just going to stop killing people or engage in a genuine political dialogue. I don't even know what that would look like. So I think it's, and I think a lot of people in ASEAN understand that, but they don't have a better idea. So they continue to support it, as do a number of other countries, because they simply have no better idea. So for me, again, I applaud ASEAN's initial effort, but the 5-point consensus was born dead, and it's still dead.
Could ASEAN still play a role?
It's hard in Myanmar. Of all the places I've served and lived in my life, it's the least compromising place, particularly the military. Not only the military, but the military particularly is absolutely uncompromising and willing to see major damage and destruction done in the country in order to stay in power. That makes it really hard for ASEAN or UN envoys or anyone else to try to negotiate a deal, because I don't know what a deal would look like. The opposition wants the junta out of power. The military refuses to leave power. I don't know how you reach a compromise that would work. So I would like to see ASEAN put more pressure on the generals, but that's not really what ASEAN does. and they're certainly not going to impose sanctions or anything like that. So I think until the situation inside Myanmar changes and there is an opening for progress, then I think ASEAN can play a helpful role. But until then, frankly, I don't think there's much it can do.
Mm-hmm. And how about China's role? Could China's increasingly overt support for the regime be one reason ASEAN's approach has failed?
I don't think it's the reason ASEAN's approach has failed, but it's certainly very unhelpful. It's given the junta some momentum after it looked like the resistance had quite a bit of momentum. Clearly, China's put a lot of pressure on some of the ethnic armed organizations to sign ceasefire agreements or stop fighting, and it's also provided support for the junta. So I think that has made the situation worse and actually moved the country further away from a possible solution. But I wouldn't blame that for the failure of the ASEAN effort. I think the ASEAN effort had failed because of the military, mostly. The Myanmar military, the ASEAN effort had failed well before that.
What does the return of Deputy Chief of Mission Douglas Sonic to Myanmar mean for relations with the U.S.?
Doug Sonic is a professional diplomat. I know him very well. He's very capable. It's a normal rotation. It does not, as far as I know, I don't have any reason to believe that that signifies any change in the U.S. approach. It's a normal rotation.
So before we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to say to the people of Myanmar?
I wish I had something to say that would, along the lines of it's all going to be resolved in the next 6 months. Unfortunately, the situation looks very dire. I and so many other people who know Myanmar feel so sad for the suffering of the Myanmar people. As always, we admire the incredible courage and resilience of the Myanmar people. I think they are right to feel that the international community has let them down. But all I can say is there are a lot of us who know Myanmar who care very deeply and offer. All we can do at this point is offer our hope and to try to keep the issue alive so that it isn't ignored in the international community.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, Mr. Marciel.
Thank you.